I wanted to brush it aside, firstly as some kind of joke, and later as just one of those things that could be explained quite naturally, if only I knew the facts. But I could not brush it aside, for whatever reason. This claim about hearing a flute. It all happened in the Berbice River steamer while Mr. Nevinson, head of the Berbice Timber and Balata Company, his daughter Jessie, and I were traveling towards Hood de Vries, the company's upriver station. Mr. Nevinson, an older man whom I had come to regard as a friend, had invited me to go up to Hood de Vries to paint pictures which he said were intended for the walls of the renovated head office in New Amsterdam. Jessie suggested during the trip that the real reason why I was invited along was because Mr. Nevinson wanted company. She said he was acting strangely and looked as if something were on his mind. Then Jessie claimed to have heard a flute being played on board the steamer, a flute which neither I nor her mother nor anyone else heard. Not anyone else except Mr. Nevinson. They had heard it several times before, they said, mostly in Queenstown near their home. And now the flute was traveling with us. There was more to it. I call the whole story My Bones and My Flute. Jessie was talking to me about the flute. She said, "Something has struck me. During the last 2 or 3 days, it seemed to have got nearer." "Nearer?" I asked. She nodded. "That's the best way I can describe it. When I began to hear it a week or 2 ago, it seemed to come from a distance a few streets off. But yesterday and the day before, it was much nearer. In fact, it might have been in the next yard." She looked at me in sudden anxiety and alarm. "I say, Milt, you don't think there can be anything spooky in it, do you?" I grunted non-committally. She shifted her feet about uneasily. "It's no joke. I didn't think anything of it before, but now that Mother and the rest of you say you didn't hear anything, I'm beginning to wonder about it. You don't think it could be some sort of manifestation? Isn't that the word? Something only Daddy and I can sense." "I'm afraid I don't care to express an opinion yet," I told her, my voice heavy with pomposity, as it often could be in those days. "But don't you think there can be some natural explanation?" she said. "I should hope there is," I replied. "I always prefer to find a natural explanation before plunging into speculations about the occult. The best thing will be to wait a day or 2 more and see what happens. Whenever you hear your flute again, don't forget to let me know at once." "Ah, this means I'm always going to be listening for it now. I really hope we'll be able to explain it. I detest anything ghostly. I've never seen a ghost, and I don't ever want to." We sat in silence for a long while, staring at the monotonous greens of the jungle. The heat swirled around us like invisible twining tendrils of silk, and the dull throbbing of the engines beneath the deck produced a drowsiness which I found myself fighting hard to resist. I felt myself possessed with an urge to remain awake and alert. It was as though I could sense something menacing in the still array of green foliage that loomed up on either side of us, and dared not shut my eyes, lest I were overwhelmed by some stealthy horror, only waiting for an opportunity to pounce. Suddenly I rose. "I think I'll go and see what your father is doing in the dining room," I said. And Jessie rose too, but did not seem enthusiastic. "When Daddy is in a mood, I never go near him," she said. "You can risk it if you like. I'll go and talk to Mrs. Lumsden." "Your father is not half the ogre you think him," I told her. "I'm willing to bet he's in no mood at all. He's probably bored with the small talk your mother and the church folk have been pouring forth like characters in a Jane Austen novel. And he's discreetly decided to do a bolt into the dining saloon. It's what I would have done myself." A minute later, I proved myself right. For when I entered the dining room, Mr. Nevinson greeted me with a smile, glancing up from a yellow document spread out before him. "Well, young man, looking for me?" he asked. "Yes, I came to see what you were doing. Mrs. N says you're in a mood, but I didn't believe it." "Nell is generally suspicious of me when I retire to enjoy my own company for a spell. Sit down and let's talk." He spoke as though he had been expecting me, and I felt a grain of curiosity itching its way through me as I drew out a chair and seated myself at the table opposite him. He held out a tin of cigarettes, and I accepted one. And then, seeing that there was one already between his lips and lit, I produced my lighter, clicked it alight, and pushed it across the table towards him. To my surprise, he drew back his head with some haste, saying, "Oh, it's all right, my boy, don't trouble. I'll get it lit in a moment." He spoke with evident embarrassment, and at the same time swept the manuscript towards him in a swift, protective manner. It fell into his lap, and he retrieved it, folded it in two, and slipped it between the leaves of a thick volume lying on the table at his elbow. It was a Dutch-English dictionary that I knew well, for I had often seen it on the desk in his study. "I've been doing a little translating," he murmured. For a few minutes we spoke of trifling matters, the heat, the discomfort of traveling on these steamers, the quality of food we had at lunch, Mr. and Mrs. Lumsden's disembarkment in a few minutes' time at Brave Lands, where the Anglican Church stood. He seemed to take care not to refer to the manuscript, and I thought it discreet not to ask him a direct question concerning its contents or its origin. Abruptly, however, he glanced down at the dictionary and said, "It's really too warm to be doing this sort of thing, but I couldn't resist the temptation." He looked across at me. "I'm going to tell you about it before long, and I'm sure you'll be interested." After a pause, he went on, "About this flute, Milton, I know you're puzzled. I am myself, and in fact I meant to talk to you about it. But in the meantime, tell me something. I heard you and Jessie went below to inquire after it. Nell mentioned it to me just before you came. Do I understand that Jessie thought it was being played on the lower deck?" "That's right, sir, so she said." "Wasn't it there you heard it too? I saw you standing by the companionway looking down." He nodded. "I simply wanted to know. As a matter of fact, I wasn't looking down the companionway because I thought the sound was coming from below. I was pacing the deck and happened to pause there for a moment." "Then you mean you didn't hear it coming up from the lower deck?" He shook his head slowly. "No, Milton. It was up here, on the deck, right beside me." Now that I look back on it, I realize that his statement did not instill into me half as much dread and dismay as it ought to have done. I think, too, that it is because I had always held him in such deep respect and had so much confidence in him that I did not exclaim or show incredulity. I simply continued to stare at him, puzzled and waiting for him to go on, not doubting for an instant that a perfectly simple explanation was about to follow. Even when he had come to the end of the astounding story he narrated to me, I somehow did not feel an urge to ridicule him or smile with skepticism. Had you known him as I did, you would have agreed, I'm sure, that he was the kind of man you would no more have attempted to associate with the fantastic or the occult than you would have thought of attending a play by Bernard Shaw with the expectation of witnessing a pretty little love drama featuring sentimental song hits. He said to me, "Absurd as it may sound, I couldn't risk letting you touch this manuscript, my boy, because there is every likelihood that exactly what happened to Jessie and me would happen to you. That's why I drew back so hastily and swept it into my lap when you stretched across to light my cigarette." That was how he began. Then he went on to tell me about the manuscript. He had seen it for the first time at Hood de Vries on Wednesday evening in January, exactly 3 weeks before. It had belonged to an old Buffiander, an Indian Negro half-breed. He continued, he had lived 2 miles higher up at Hostenland, but had died recently. His name was Patois, and he was a very likable fellow. He used to trade an occasional raft of greenheart with us. He told me of this thing nearly 2 years ago, but he said he couldn't let me have it, or even see it, because there was a superstition attached to it. It was supposed to bring good fortune to its possessor, provided it was kept shut away in safety from daylight and fire. But it must never be handled at any time. What would happen if it were handled, Patois himself didn't even seem to know. He was a fairly intelligent chap, I must admit, and he was quite frank with me. He said that, so far as he could see, it had brought him no especial good luck. But all the same, he wasn't going to run the risk of being harmed. So he always kept it shut up in the canister in which it had been kept since the moment it had come into his possession. He said that even he himself had only peeped at it once. As it happens, I've done him many a favor in the course of our transactions up here, and he took a liking to me. We were good friends, and he always promised that when he died, he would leave the canister for me, though he warned me that it wouldn't be safe to tamper with it. He said that while he didn't believe himself in the stupid nonsense that most of the people up here believe in, he knew that there were certain things that men could not explain, and he preferred not to trouble evil, lest evil trouble me, as he put it. It was his favorite saying. I never pressed him to let me see this manuscript, though naturally I was very interested in it, especially as he once hinted that the writing on it was Dutch, and that he believed it came down from the early days of the colony. He said an Indian gave it to him in the canister in which it was kept. It was a present to him for having cured the Indian of a bad attack of malaria. This Indian fellow, it appears, had never heard of quinine in the form we know it in, and Patois dosed him regularly and got him better within a few days. To my surprise, when I arrived at Hood de Vries 3 weeks ago, the first thing Rayburn, the caretaker, told me was that Patois had died of an attack of jaundice the week before, and that before dying he had asked that his good luck canister, as he called it, be given to me. Patois wasn't married. He had no relatives. The buck woman he lived with was only a paramour, so there was evidently no fuss about the canister. Rayburn collected it the day after his death and brought it to my cottage at Hood de Vries. I found it on the dressing table in my bedroom. It's a small thing, 10 inches by 7 and 3 inches deep, made of tin and rather rusty looking. Well, Milton, as you know yourself, I'm the last person on earth who thinks twice about superstitions, and without hesitation, I opened the canister. There was no lock on it. It was simply shut tight, and I just had to prise up the lid. What followed explains why I'm telling you this story. This adventure that I've come to call my bones and my flute.